Picture two men getting on the same bus. The first man is dressed sharp. New jacket, new shoes, a phone worth more than the bus itself. He looks like money, because he spends like money. By the end of the month, most of what he made is already gone. The second man is wearing a sweater with a hole at the elbow. Same hole, for years. He clips coupons. He rides this same bus instead of taking a cab, every single day, for 30 years straight. Everyone on that bus assumes the first man is doing better. Everyone on that bus is wrong. The man in the old sweater is going to die worth more than $180 million. And when he does, almost nobody who rode that bus with him will believe it. Before we go further, where are you watching this from, and what are your financial dreams? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. This is the story of Jack MacDonald. And it might change how you look at every broke person you pass today. Jack MacDonald wasn't born into nothing, and he didn't stumble into a fortune by luck either. Both of those versions would be easier to tell. Neither is true. He was born in 1915 in Prince Rupert, British Columbia, and moved to Seattle with his family at age 3. His parents ran a business, MacDonald Meat Company, a meat company in Seattle, and the profits from that business became the seed money Jack would spend the rest of his life quietly growing. He joined the Merchant Marine in the 1930s. He served in the South Pacific during World War II. He came home, finished a law degree at the University of Washington in 1940, and took a government job as an attorney for the Veterans Administration, where he stayed for 30 straight years. So here's the actual shape of the story, not rags to riches. Inheritance to empire. A modest family business, handed to a man with one skill nobody around him seemed to notice: patience, and 50 years to let it compound. Here's where most people get the story wrong. They hear frugal and picture someone who was simply cheap, or scared of money, or just used to having none. That is not what was happening inside Jack MacDonald. His stepdaughter, Regan Dennis, later described how he actually operated in the market. He didn't hand his money to an advisor and hope. He researched. He decided exactly which stocks he wanted, and he bought them himself, on conviction, without asking anyone else to validate the decision first. That detail matters more than the sweater and the bus combined. Living below your means is arithmetic. Anyone can technically do it. What's rare is what MacDonald paired it with: the confidence to hold a position for decades while looking, by every outward measure, like a man who had nothing to show for it. Nobody around him was cheering him on. Nobody at that VA office knew he was building an empire. There was no applause for the discipline, no audience, no proof it was working, for 50 years. And here's the part worth sitting with: when you are actually building something built to last, there usually isn't going to be applause along the way. The people who need to see proof before they'll stay committed rarely make it to the part of the story where the proof shows up. MacDonald didn't need the proof. He'd already decided. That decision, made once, quietly, is what 50 years of compounding actually ran on. This isn't a call to live like a monk, and it isn't a guilt trip about your coffee habit. It's simpler than that. When you've actually decided what something is for, the doubt of people who can't see the plan stops being relevant. That's not sainthood. That's just conviction that outlasts everyone else's patience for watching you wait. For most of his life, almost nobody knew what MacDonald was actually worth. But there was one moment where he chose to let a piece of it show, and the way he did it tells you everything about how deliberate this all was. In 2011, Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation was marking its 30th anniversary. 2 years before Jack MacDonald died, he gave the hospital permission to publicly reveal something he had kept anonymous: a $50 million pledge to fund pediatric research, a number that would later grow to $75 million by the time of his death. He didn't do this for recognition. He was already deep into his 90s. He had no reason left to build a reputation, and even after the reveal, he kept living exactly the way he always had: same sweaters, same bus rides, same bargain hunting. The disguise didn't relax even after part of the secret was out. If anything, that's the clearest proof the frugality was never a performance for anyone else's benefit in the first place. It was never about hiding poverty. It was never about broadcasting wealth either. It was just how he lived, whether anyone was watching or not. Here's the framework hiding underneath his entire life. 3 pillars. Once you see them, you'll start noticing them everywhere. Pillar 1. The disguise isn't deception, it's the absence of performance. MacDonald never dressed poor to trick anyone. He simply never spent the energy required to look rich, because that energy, and that money, was better spent letting a portfolio grow untouched for 50 years. Pillar 2. Small decisions, repeated without exception, become the fortune. One bus ride instead of one taxi means nothing. 30 years of it, invested every time, is a different number entirely. He was once so excited about a sale on frozen orange juice that he bought enough cans to need a second freezer. That's not a quirky detail, that's the entire method, in miniature. Buy on the sale, hold, repeat, for 50 years. Pillar 3. The purpose is decided before the fortune exists. MacDonald didn't build the money first and figure out where it should go later. His mother, Catherine, had spent years as a devoted volunteer at Seattle Children's Hospital. His father, Frederick, believed in helping people who had nothing. Long before Jack MacDonald had $187 million to give away, his parents had already told him, without knowing it, exactly where it needed to go. He even quietly sent gifts, year after year, to a small town in Canada, the town where his parents are buried, long before anyone knew the scale of what he was building toward. Disguise without deception. Small decisions, repeated for decades. A purpose chosen before the money existed. That's the invisible wealth method, and MacDonald ran it for over 50 years without more than a handful of people catching on. Jack MacDonald died in September 2013, in Seattle, at age 98. He had no children of his own. When his will was read, 3 organizations found out, almost all at once, that they'd just received the largest gifts in their histories, from a man most of their staff had never even met. The Salvation Army didn't even know it was named in his plans until officials from Seattle Children's contacted them after his death to tell them. $187.6 million. Split 3 ways. 40% to Seattle Children's Research Institute, in honor of his mother. 30% to the Salvation Army's Northwest Division, in honor of his father. 30%, $56.1 million, the largest bequest in the University of Washington's history, to the UW School of Law, the school that had given him the education that made all of it possible. Every dollar had already been assigned a meaning, decades before it existed. One of the people who knew him, a director at the Children's Hospital Foundation, later described how MacDonald saw himself, not as a wealthy man, but as a steward of assets that were always meant for something bigger than himself. You don't need $187 million for this method to apply to you. You need the willingness to be underestimated for a very long time, and the willingness to decide what something is for before you have any proof it will work. Every dollar you don't spend trying to look successful is a dollar that stays working for you instead. The hard part was never the math. The hard part is tolerating the years where nobody's impressed, where nothing is visible yet, where by every outward measure you look like you're falling behind the people spending everything they make. Jack MacDonald tolerated that for over 50 years. Not because he didn't care what people thought. Because he'd already decided what the money was for, and that decision made everyone else's opinion irrelevant. He didn't need permission. He didn't need an audience. He didn't even need the proof to show up on any particular schedule. He just kept going. That's really the whole secret, and it's less glamorous than most people want it to be. When you've actually planned for something that matters, the years when nothing seems to be happening aren't a sign you're wrong. They're just the part of the story nobody claps for. Here's your assignment, starting today. For the next 7 days, before you buy anything that exists purely to be seen, the upgrade you don't need, the version you bought because of who might notice, stop and write it down. Just write it down. Don't feel bad about it. Just see it. At the end of 7 days, add it up. Then ask yourself what that same money could become if you let it sit, untouched, for the next 20 years. Comment below with the one thing on your list you're most surprised by. Somewhere in Seattle, there's still a bus route Jack MacDonald rode for 30 years. Nobody on it today knows his name. Nobody riding it ever knew, back then, that the quiet man in the old sweater was worth more than most of them would make in 10 lifetimes combined. Maybe that was the whole point. The truest fortunes are the ones that never needed anyone to notice, until the exact moment they were needed most. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. We're covering the financial crimes, empires, and quiet fortunes nobody talks about every week.